He's been asked this question thousands of times. Ben Baby joins us. Ben, what is going on this front?
Hannah, you might want to grab some popcorn, some fruit snacks, maybe some beaver nuggets from Buc-ee's, and settle in for a little bit, because this stalemate is going for a while here. When we last talked to Trey Hendrickson, he made a very clear indication that he does not want to play out the final year of his current deal. And Hendrickson is looking for a long-term deal with guarantees, and the team is eyeing a short-term deal. And Hendrickson believes that what he's looking for is an appropriate indicator of where his value really lies. And so trying to find that middle ground and seeing which side budgets first, that's going to be the big question in getting this resolved. And going back to the league meetings in which I asked Bengals Executive Vice President Katie Blackburn about what it's going to take to keep Hendrickson happy in 2025 and in Cincinnati, I got the sense that it needed both sides coming together, with Hendrickson perhaps moving a lot closer to the Bengals than him moving towards his angle. And talking to guys in the locker room, there's been a lot of support for where he's at and for how he's went about things. Jamar Chase said this week that he loved the energy that Hendrickson brought when he was at practice just a few weeks ago, and that he deserves to be paid. And it's a sentiment that even Joe Burrow has echoed. But the big question, are the Bengals going to invest in someone who turns 31 this year? I think that's a big heart of the matter, because the Bengals definitely have the money to do it if they want.
So, and that's key, because the perception of the Bengals is this team just doesn't have enough money, right, to get things done. But they signed Higgins, they signed Chase, and now they have enough money, as you said, for Hendrickson. But here's what I don't get, and if this is maybe indicative of the way they do business, why isn't their first-round draft pick, Shamar Stewart, not participating in OTAs, hasn't signed his rookie deal? What's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know how the Bengals are getting through practice right now with all these edge rushers currently out, but definitely Shamar Stewart has been one that every time we're out there on the sideline watching from a distance, and it's been a situation that's never really been right from the beginning. At the very outset of the negotiations, there was a dispute over the training camp roster bonus from a source who is familiar with those negotiations and how they've gone. That got settled pretty quickly from what I was told. It then shifted towards a situation regarding the contract language, and this is a big part that potentially could void future guarantees. In Shamar's side, they're looking for language that's similar to what other players have had. And while the Bengals do contend that it's a fairly standard contract that rookies get, we do know that they are fiercely protective of that guaranteed money and really do not want that to turn into dead money in future years. And in talking to Shamar, he wants to be on the field as quickly as possible, wants to be getting physical reps instead of these mental reps, but he also wants to minimize that risk. And whether those sides can iron out that language, that's going to be huge. The interesting thing about this and why it's unique, he hasn't signed that participation waiver. He wants to exercise all of his leverage that he can right now to make sure he's got a contract he feels comfortable with as he starts this rookie season.
I just keep thinking about Al Golden coming into Cincinnati. He doesn't have any players. Ben Baby, maybe one day we'll talk X's and O's instead of contracts, my friend. Thank you. What do you think of what you just heard, of sort of everything that's going on? I mean, obviously they spent so much money on the offensive side of the ball.
If you took the team name off and you just described the situation, you'd guess the Cincinnati Bengals. With Shamar Stewart, with Trey Hendrickson, this is how they operate. They have the contract drama of the Cowboys, but normally they don't have the cash of the Cowboys. They're their older, weirder cousin in those situations, okay? But when I look at this Bengals team, I'm thinking about a team that needs to hit the ground running. Joe Burrow got better as the season went along last year. His quarterback rating increased from September on to October, November, and then December. But it was 105 September, so he's still really good then. But they need to be really sharp in week one. They're not going to be because of the contract drama with their edge rushers. Ben Baby wrote on ESPN.com recently that Trey Hendrickson was 48% of their sacks. Why are you playing games with 48% of your sacks? I don't care that you're over 30 years old, okay? I'm over 30 years old. I feel great. And so you can give me as many contracts as you'd like, ESPN. And so when I'm looking at the situation, I don't know if Lou Anarumo was the problem, okay? I don't know if Al Golden is even going to be upgraded over Lou Anarumo, okay? But what I do know is that they need to get their contract situation settled. They need to be introspective about why they have these slow starts, because I don't think it's anything to do with preseason reps or training camp. It's to do with contract stuff that never gets resolved.
Whew.
how to follow that? Older, weirder cousin. They're like the Shelbyville.
So good, right?
I think that the Bengals are betting that Al Golden can do a better job developing young players than Luana Romo. Obviously had a ton of success in college because developing young players has been the problem with this defense. Now you could also argue identifying and drafting young players has been the bigger issue. No question about that. But I do think that there are players, particularly in the secondary, that at least have promise. It's not devoid of talent. You have DBs who at various points have played well. Dax Taylor was injured much of last season, has played well. Cam Taylor-Britt, plays corner on the outside, has had stretches where he's looked good. Geno Smith was great 2 years ago in Baltimore, by the way. So if I'm Al Golden, I think my biggest hope really starts in the back end, that you can get some of those players to be more consistent, or in the case of like a Stone, return to the form we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah, and it's not just that they have to play well, but where they have to play well specifically. If that's in the red zone. That was the biggest problem for the Bengals defense last year, outside of the fact that they had nobody who could rush the passer besides Trey Hendrickson. They were 30th in red zone touchdown rate allowed last year. And when quarterbacks threw against them in the red zone, they scored touchdowns on 34% of their pass attempts, the highest rate for any team in football. And that some of that is talent, but a lot of it is just communication. It's working together. It's, manipulating routes. It's dealing with crossers and picks and all that stuff. And it's about really mental stuff, even more than the physical talent stuff in those kind of tight quarters. So I know that Trey Hendrickson's going to be the big story. They have to get him signed. I agree with Kevin wholeheartedly. But Al Golden has to coach up that back end. They have to play better, have to play smarter. That was really the thing that worked on this Super Bowl run a couple of years ago. That was such a smart defense, so good at passing routes off, so good at not making mistakes that were going to cost them big plays. That's not been the case in Cincinnati over the past couple of years.
Yeah, just consider they scored 30 or more points 8 times last season. They lost half of those games. That's tied for the most in NFL history. Into the future, Bill, explain, please.
Well, the Saints did not want to go away from their roster building philosophy of just worrying about the cap later, just pushing everything into the future. But then Derek Carr retired and handed them back $30 million. And now, looking at their roster, there's a series of veterans: Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, Taysom Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, veterans, core players who are all free agents after this season. If they all get cut or move on, that would hit $50 million onto the Saints cap in dead money next year, but they'd still have $33 million in cap space without having to restructure anybody else for the first time seemingly in a generation. So the Saints can actually see a future where they're not cap constrained from the first moment the offseason begins.
I'll believe that when I see it, Bill Barnwell. But yes, you are exactly right. The Saints have never wanted to hit the reset button basically in the last 20 years, and Derek Carr went ahead and pressed the reset button for them. It's one of the best gifts Derek Carr could ever give the New Orleans Saints, is saying, hey, you're in a rebuild now, okay? That's better than anything you could have done on the field, especially once he got injured in 2025. To me, I'm looking at this saying, you need to familiarize yourself not with Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener if he gets healthy. If you're a Saints fan, you need to familiarize yourself with Arch Manning and John Mateer and all of the 2026 NFL draft quarterbacks. That's the end of the pool you guys are going to be on. And if people are saying, Kevin, Arch Manning might not come out in 2026, well, good news, the Saints are going to be bad following season as well. So they'll be in the mix for Arch Manning for a long time. I just don't see a lot of talent. I'm sorry. This will ultimately be good for Saints fans. Just relax. It's going to be okay.
That would be so crazy because the last time they took a quarterback in the first 2 rounds was his grandfather, Archie Manning, second overall. Wouldn't that be wild? All right, Bill, perfect. Now, you say the team least likely to worry about tomorrow are the Atlanta Falcons. They haven't had a winning season in 7 years. So how so, my friend?
Yeah, Hannah, the fact that they haven't had a winning season in 7 years makes me think they should be approaching this slowly. Instead, they appear to be accelerating and thinking they're one player away. They needed edge rushers. Their pass rush has been terrible for a decade now, but they go out and trade a future first-round pick for James Pierce in the draft after taking Jalen Walker earlier in the first round. That's just a lot of draft capital to give up for a situation where we don't know if they're one player away. History tells us this is a trade that most teams come to regret. It can occasionally be a disaster. I'm thinking about the Broncos trading a future first-round pick and getting Alphonso Smith, and the Seahawks landing a guy by the name of Earl Thomas, who worked out pretty well for them. This is just a trade that teams do not make anymore in the NFL, and the Falcons seem to have been more desperate than calculated with their move.
I think that the Falcons offseason as a whole is representative of, well, shall I say, the job security of the front office, which is why you always get nervous when you have GMs on the hot seat, because they're acting not just out of long-term interest, but out of short-term interest, to Bill's point. Which isn't to say I disagree with everything they did. I mean, I like some of the players they added. I'm particularly intrigued by Jalen Walker, who they took in the first round without trading up to go get him. He's a really fascinating player in Georgia's scheme. He's a little bit of a tweener, came in as an off-ball linebacker, but I think has the necessary speed and pass rush ability to be really effective in Raheem Morris's defense. But it does feel like one of those two pass rushers they drafted in the first round has to be productive immediately based on the way that they've approached this.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see why they went all in. Only 31 sacks last season. That was 31st in the NFL, ahead of only the Patriots. Okay, Bill, you say the team most likely to petition the NFL to use an extra football is Tampa Bay. Now, you used that one for the Texans last year. So what do you expect from the Bucs?
You can always use a good superlative again. There's no rule saying you can't use it twice. And the Bucs just have too many playmakers to work with here. They brought back every single player who either caught a pass or ran with the football on offense last year. They're getting Chris Godwin back from his season-ending injury, and then they used their first-round pick on Emeka Egbuka, who's going to be a really exciting prospect at wide receiver as well. Nothing wrong with this philosophy. Adding playmakers is not the problem. But for first-time offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard, this is really fascinating. You have a lot of players who are expecting a fair number of targets, fair number of carries. You're going to have to meter that out a bit, and it's going to be on Baker Mayfield to get the ball and spread it around to all these different playmakers as well. So it's a good problem to have, but it's still kind of a problem in Tampa Bay.
I don't know if it's a problem. Bill Barnwell, first of all, I think Baker Mayfield can spread it around. But when I look at this Bucs franchise, I go back to a line that Billy Beane had in Moneyball 20 years ago. When you have to do something, you're screwed, right? The way the Bucs draft now is for value. They're drafting because their roster is so good, like the Eagles do, like the Ravens do, like the Rams do. These top-of-the-line franchises who understand you stack positions, you just take best player available, and you go from there. They obviously need to take a step forward in their secondary, but they drafted Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame in the second round. Hannah can tell you a lot about that. But I'm looking at this roster and I'm saying the way they're stacking talent, Bill, at some point we're going to wake up and they're going to be undeniable Super Bowl contenders. Might not be this year, but in a couple of years they're building towards that because Jason Light is one of the best GMs in all of football. And the way they draft and the fact that they had a luxury at wide receiver and they took another one, they're doing value picks. That's how you win Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at last season, their pass catchers caught 41 touchdowns. That was tied with the Ravens for the second most in the NFL behind the Bengals. We're going to talk about them later, by the way. Finally, the Panthers. They are the team that Bill says is most likely to have definitely solved their problem this time for sure. Which I like. Bill, it seems like they're always solving problems. What do you like about this offseason?
Yeah, they want to get that wide receiver to the first team since 2005 Lions to use 3 top 40 picks in consecutive drafts on wide receivers. I don't know if they're even 1 for 2 so far. They really get kind of up and down. They traded Jonathan Mingo quickly, so he's not going to be the guy, but they love Ted McMillan. And I like him as a player. Just wonder if you're going to get the most out of him given where he was successful in college. He averaged more than 4 yards per route run working out of the slot, more route 2 when he was working outside. But look at the Panthers last year. Their best wide receivers were Adam Thielen and Jalen Coker, 2 guys who were most effective working out of the slot themselves. So sort of wonder how they use McMillan, where they position him. They might not get the most out of him if they keep him as that sort of pure outside X receiver.